The big battle is going to be over what happens with the Bush tax cuts. And the fundamental problem with the Bush tax cuts was the fact that they created the structural deficit that we find ourselves in today. I think the logical way forward in the midst of the downturn is to keep them in place for now for middle-class families, but allow them to expire for people making over $250,000 a year adjusted gross income. And if you did that, you would still get the economic benefit to the portion of the population that spends the most of their income. You'd get the most economic bang for your buck with the most reduction in the overall deficit. You'd be able to plug about a $700 billion hole. Federal oversight is required, and it wasn't exactly being implemented for many years. The Minerals Management Service, whose job it was to be overseeing these offshore rigs, was a disaster and must be reorganized in a way that has real walls between industry and regulators. It's pretty clear that BP was way outside the norm in terms of their failures. There are citations that get made to these companies for things called willful and egregious violations. These are not just your run-of-the-mill average mistake, but things that get people hurt, things that can cause oil spills, things that are really of a threat to either the environment or their workers. Most of the industry, BP's compatriots in the industry, were at 0, were at 7, were at 13. They were over 700. They were off the charts in terms of how they were operating in an incredibly irresponsible manner. And one of the things that we did in the Natural Resources Committee is we were creating legislation and passing legislation to deal with the BP oil spill was to say, if you're completely out of the curve in terms of what is normal for the industry, and you are putting your employees at risk as a result, and you're putting the environment at risk, you're not going to get to be able to bid on those oil leases. And that we're going to have a rolling 7-year average, and until you get down to where the rest of the industry is, you don't get to play. We're not going to have BP out there anymore. We're going to have ConocoPhillips and Mobil and Exxon and all those folks. But unless you're able to show that you can do this safely, you should not be at the table.
So you do favor offshore drilling?
Well, that's for existing. That's for existing leases, and I think there are places that make sense, and there are places where there shouldn't be offshore drilling. Can you imagine, for example, it's pretty easy to drill safely if you're not BP in many parts of the Gulf of Mexico. Can you imagine that oil spill if it would have happened off the north coast of Alaska with the ice and the sub-zero temperatures and 20-foot seas, trying to get that oil rig capped in those kinds of conditions that make the hurricanes and the tropical storms in the Gulf look like nothing? So you got to use some common sense about how you allow for this stuff. And there's a difference between shallow water and deep water drilling. And I think if you're going to do deep water drilling, you need to be able to demonstrate that you don't just have a piece of paper, a plan. You actually have the equipment to do what the plan says. And they had never been forced to demonstrate that they could remove a blowout preventer at 5,000 feet and put a new one back on and do the kinds of things that were necessary to get this well plugged.
Do you think BP's been held accountable enough?
I don't know how you can answer that at this point. They have a lot of work to do. I think at this point the answer is no. Until those shrimpers and the people in the oyster fields down in the Gulf and those jobs are restored and those families have livelihoods again, when all of that is true, then I think we'll be able to say BP has met their responsibility, and we're just not there yet. I'm very encouraged to see combat operations cease in Iraq. I'm looking forward to the day when all of our service members are able to withdraw. But to see combat operations end is a huge milestone, and something I don't think we would have seen if there were a different person in the White House right now. I think it took a long time to learn the right way to work with the Iraqis. It wasn't until there was a counterinsurgency strategy that anything seemed to go our way in that country. I'm glad we've begun to learn that lesson and implement it in Afghanistan, because I think the sooner we're able to empower the Afghans, the sooner we'll be able to do the exact same thing in Afghanistan and bring our combat troops home.
Do you think that veteran services are adequate? And if not, how can they be improved?
I think we've made a lot of progress in the last 2 years providing veterans with the services they deserve, but I don't think we're there yet. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we were able to pass something that has been tried for literally decades, and it's called advanced appropriations for the VA. What it does is it gives them sort of their budget gets passed 2 years out instead of with everyone else. And it sort of insulates them from the last minute budget negotiations and shenanigans that can result in people cutting deals and money that was supposed to be there suddenly disappearing and going to some other program. Veterans groups have been fighting for years to try and get that done. This is the first Congress that's been able to make good on that promise, and I think it will bode well for our VA facility here in Albuquerque. One of the other things that I've been working on in the Defense Appropriations Bill, the Defense Authorization Bill this year, that we were just able to include in the House version, is to extend some of the common sense benefits that we've seen in health reform also to our veterans. Today, because of the health reform bill, if you're a 25-year-old on your parents' plan, you can stay on that plan until you're 26. That is new, but it did not apply to anybody within the TRICARE system. And so I was able to add language to that legislation saying that within the TRICARE system that our veterans utilize, that they can keep their dependents on until they're 26, which is the same situation that any other American has access to. I think we made a lot of progress, but I'm not an ideologue when it comes to healthcare. There are going to be things that need to be fixed and changed along the way. It's a very complicated subject. I know that the fundamentals, the things we did, like saying to insurance companies that if you have diabetes, you should not be told that you have a pre-existing condition and you can't buy insurance. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it just pushes all those people into the ER, which costs us a lot more money. Telling women that, we're going to charge you higher insurance rates than a man the same age and the same risk factors. Things like that should have been illegal a long time ago. I think that the places where we're going to continue to need to work are aligning the incentives within healthcare towards higher value, better outcomes, and frankly, less procedures and less money. Right now, the healthcare system is too expensive, and the more we can do to align good outcomes with reimbursement, as opposed to lots of procedures with reimbursement, the more efficient and the whole system will become, which saves us money. But more importantly, you'll get the right outcome the first time, which is the best thing for the patient. Well, I think the fundamental premise within federal policy is that the equal protection under the Constitution. And so whatever legal protections you grant to the population as a whole, you can't constitutionally justify withholding those legal benefits from any segment of the population. And so regardless of whether you call it in a given state a domestic partnership or a same-sex marriage or something else, what's important from a policy point of view is that those benefits are conferred to the entire population. And so we can't be picking and choosing who we allow to have adoption or visitation rights or any of those things. So that is one of the reasons why I've also advocated for the repeal of DOMA, because it creates special class problems which to me are constitutionally indefensible.